Trustee meeting, and just a delightful time with our trustees who came from across the convention, and nearly everybody was there. I think this was probably the highest attendance we've had in some time, and we had just a terrific meeting. And I want to give you two things. One, a report of trustee actions. I'll have to do that as briefly and concisely as I can, and there will be an elaboration. You'll find more in the gatekeeper and other things to come that will tell you more and more of what happened. And then, as I always do at this time of year, share with you what I share with them about the state of our seminary. We'll begin with a brief description of some of the major actions taken by our trustees. First of all, we're always glad when they approve a budget, and they did do that. It's the largest budget ever in the history of New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary. It includes a modest tuition increase, about 3%. It includes an across-the-board raise for faculty and staff. And our biggest challenge with our budget remains the instability of the cooperative program. It is still not performing consistently and well, so continue to pray for our churches to support that cooperative program. It undergirds you as seminary students and faculty. It undergirds our missionaries, and all of us experience challenges whenever the cooperative program is not functioning well. So everything else, though, in the seminary is just operating very well, and we're very pleased. It's the happiest budget that we've been able to present since Hurricane Katrina, and that made it a very happy budget indeed. Took some actions to enhance our curriculum as we continue to focus on A, making theological education as accessible as possible, and B, equipping and raising up a generation of students who can transform the world through the gospel of Jesus Christ. Some of the actions include certificates for our missionaries. We've worked very closely with the International Mission Board, and we have in place now certificates that exactly match the requirements they have for people serving in various capacities at the International Mission Board, and they're also available largely online, so missionaries from all over the world will be able to do those studies. A brand new certificate for Messianic studies. I don't think anybody has ever done this in the United States before, focusing on Messianic Jews and preparing them for ministry to the Jewish community. We're very excited about that one. It'll be an undergraduate level certificate so that absolutely anybody can engage in that study. And again, offered largely online, so it'll be accessible to people everywhere. We've enhanced our theological studies program in some significant ways. We've enhanced our mentoring programs, something we've been doing for a long time, adding some further enhancements to that. We've added a new PhD major, a PhD in Great Commission Studies that will combine studies in both missions and evangelism, designed for non-residential students, and we're very excited about this for people who want to go be deep and thorough in their study of the Great Commission and all the issues involved in that. And then created a new staff position for women's ministry. Courtney Veazey, one of our PhD students, will be coordinating the details of our women's ministry academic programs. We also did something we haven't done in a long time, not in my memory or experience, and I have been here a long time, almost 40 years on the seminary campus. We created a new division, a new academic division. It will be called the Division of Church and Community Ministries, and we will pull together our professors in counseling and in social work as they focus on helping our churches do those things that get deeply engaged in the needs of the community around the churches. Dr. Ian Jones is being asked to serve as the chairman of that new division, and they will begin their work together August 1, and we'll look forward to seeing what comes out of that wonderful group of people. They also affirmed the faculty in many different ways, elected to the faculty. Some who had been appointed and were only serving temporarily have now been permanently elected to the faculty. They approved all the promotions that we recommended for professors, and we'll be publicizing those, and added some faculty appointments as well. One very special one I want to take a moment to talk about. An endowed chair is something a lot of people don't understand outside the academic world. I had a donor ask me one time, well, just how expensive is that chair they put behind their desk? And I said, well, it's not a chair behind the desk that you sit in. An endowed chair in the academic world is a faculty position. And there are times when donors believe that a particular faculty discipline is so important, they want to give us enough money to generate interest year by year to pay all or most of the cost of that faculty position. We call that an endowed chair. To occupy such a chair is considered one of the highest honors in the academic world, and we were so excited when a very precious Baptist couple, Jim and Rose Ramsey, told us that they were endowing a chair in counseling for our seminary as a part of their estate plans. Jim Ramsey has gone on to be with the Lord today, but his wife Rose and her daughter-in-law Cindy are with us today, and they have taken his estate and they have given us enough money to activate this chair in counseling. The Jim and Rose chair of counseling, Kristen Carver, will be appointed to that chair. And Rose Ramsey and Cindy, thank you so very much for what you have done in making this possible. Precious indeed. I wish all of you had a chance to know them. The theme that God brought to my heart again and again as I prayed about sharing with you the state of our seminary right now is from Ecclesiastes chapter 3, that marvelous passage that tells us there is a time for every purpose under heaven. Verse 4 of that chapter, Ecclesiastes 3, tells us that there's a time to weep and a time to laugh. It's been a sad season at NOBTS for a lot of different reasons, and I was drawn to that, I think, in part out of my very great respect for one of our former professors, Dr. Rick Barjon, who passed away about a week and a half ago. All of us miss him still. But as I thought about that, thought about his love for Ecclesiastes, he translated Ecclesiastes for the Broadman-Holman translation of Scripture. I thought that that really does kind of summarize where we are as a seminary. I have learned, as I've gone down life's road, that there is a reason why God doesn't tell us everything that's going to happen in our future. Doesn't tell us all that lies ahead. 17 years ago, the trustees elected me to be the 8th president of New Orleans Baptist Seminary. And those were days I will never forget. Full of excitement and promise, and of the many lessons that I learned, it's that it wasn't quite as easy in practice as it looked at the very beginning. If I had known then what lie ahead for New Orleans Seminary as those 17 years unfolded, I would have probably been absolutely terrified. But it looked so simple. I mean, you could reduce it to a formula. This is what we saw 17 years ago as the trustees and I began this journey together, and our faculty and students. We had a healthy seminary. My predecessor, Dr. Landrum P. Leavell II, by any standard of measure you want, just pick any standard of measure, was one of the greatest presidents in the history of New Orleans Seminary. And when he retired, he turned over the reins for a healthy seminary. And we had a smooth transition. That was a time of great denominational upheaval. The conservative resurgence was going on. As we began to wind down, all the entity heads in that period of time were just changing as a natural process of life. Most of those transitions were very stormy, but here at New Orleans, we were the wonder of the Southern Baptist world because we had a very smooth and healthy transition. So that's an easy formula, isn't it? Healthy school, smooth transition, great expectations. But it was going to get a little more complicated than any of us realized at the time. There was that healthy school and that smooth transition, but soon after I became president, we began to discover a menace that all of New Orleans discovered called the Formosan termite. You've never heard of Formosan termites. They came into New Orleans shortly after the World War II or Korean War. They're not quite sure when. And those fellows decided New Orleans was their favorite place in all the world to live. We had begun to realize that they were here, the whole city, and it's a very bizarre story about how they were discovered. But it was after I became president that the damage that they caused just began to explode all over the city of New Orleans and on our campus as well. Things like people driving down a street and an oak tree limb just fall on their car because termites had eaten it away, and it just fell as a car rolled under it. And we have lots of stories of our campus. Buildings were severely damaged. Trees were down. Lost so many trees we stopped counting the number of them. And so the healthy school, smooth transition, but we had to deal with all the damage of these Formosan termites. And we had an unorthodox strategy. And I knew that. Dr. Leavell was a great visionary leader and great visionary thinker, but what he was casting as a vision for us seemed very logical and very normal. We were going to take theological education, keep doing it here on our main campus, but we were going to extend it out closer to our churches through extension centers, and we were going to do things like compressed interactive video to make theological education more accessible to people. And I learned very quickly that outside of our seminary that was considered a bit strange. And that made life very interesting in some ways. And underneath all of that, as we got underway, we realized we needed to make some changes in our curriculum for the 21st century that was fast coming. And we began a massive curriculum change, taking a clean sheet of paper, and we told the faculty no one has any course in the curriculum. We're going to build an MDiv from the ground up based on the 7 basic competencies everybody in ministry needs to have. No one was doing this at the time, and it's always a very difficult and arduous task to do something like that. So there was our simple formula, now more complicated. We had a healthy school, we had a smooth transition, we had those awful Formosan termites chewing everything in sight, we had an unorthodox strategy that looked a little strange in the world of theological education, and we had all the upheaval around this massive curriculum revision that affected every single student at New Orleans Seminary. But we still clung to our great expectations, and as time began to unfold, God did an amazing work. And it was around 2004 that New Orleans Seminary became the largest seminary in the Southern Baptist Convention, and absolutely stunned and shocked everyone, especially the other seminaries. And we just got to see God do some wonderful, amazing things, and it looked like we really had the formula down for doing seminary in a powerful, effective, and efficient way. But then the formula got even more complicated, because in August of 2005, we learned about Hurricane Katrina. Now, you can just call that trouble squared. There isn't any way to describe 70% of New Orleans being completely underwater for weeks. Most of our campus being underwater, and we were all homeless, and we were scattered across 29 different states for a year with our faculty and staff having to come up with ways to teach that nobody had ever done before in the history of the world, and all the stress of having to rebuild our lives. And then there was that spike in gas prices. Gas was about $1.20 a gallon when Hurricane Katrina hit as a national average, and needless to say, you're paying just $1 or $2 more than that now, as gas has really spiked, and for all of our commuting students, that was a great hardship. And then there was the Great Recession, the worst recession of the history of the United States since the Great Depression, and then that was added to by the declining cooperative program that affected us very deeply. And you divide all that by having to do some layoffs of faculty for the first time in our school's history since the Great Depression. And then there was intense competition as schools began to see the effectiveness of what we did. It just got everybody's attention, and more people began doing similar kinds of things that we were doing. And then you divide all that by the impact of that exile we had during Katrina. And I will tell you, I understand why the Jewish people who left Jerusalem and were exiled for 70 years had real problems when they came back. It just creates all sorts of dynamics. And in the midst of all of that was multiplied the effort of massive change in the whole field of higher education. And literally, the lifestyle of every professor had to change because the world was changing around us. And all of us who were teaching were having to learn skills that nobody ever taught us when we were students, and having to do things that we had never seen anybody else do, that were all a part of this exploding change across the whole world of higher education. So it was 7 years of kicking and fighting and gouging and scratching through all of this chaos and challenge and trouble. But we never gave up on those great expectations that God gave us when we began this journey. And I find it very easy, and everybody who has been a part of this journey will certainly agree with me. We have had at NOBTS our times to weep. But I am not standing here to talk about weeping today. What I want to talk about is what the amazing grace of God has been doing in our midst. For the question that I have come to realize is the fundamental question is this: while these battles were raging, what was God doing around us? Now, students, I want you to listen very carefully, because this is going to be the reality of your life in ministry. We are in a denomination that is beginning to experience decline for the first time in its history. Last year, for the first time in our history, we had more declining churches than growing churches. We have to reach the urban centers of the United States, and we've never been very good at that as a denomination, as a Southern Baptist convention. We have lots of struggles and lots of challenges, and you are going to be in a ministry that is going to involve a lot of kicking and fighting and gouging and scratching to accomplish the things that God gives you as your mission to do. And you need to learn to keep your eye on the ball. God has been teaching us to keep our eye on. What is God doing in the midst of all the daily stuff you're having to deal with and do? So let's just look at what God was doing in the midst of all of these challenges for the last 17 years. What has God actually accomplished while we've been fighting for our lives? Let's just take a moment and look. Let's look first of all just at the numbers. Statistically, what does it look like? 1995 was a terrific year. It was Dr. Leavell's last year on as our president during his 20-year tenure, and he did such a magnificent job, and we had a great year. 2,293 students enrolled for the year, which was a high. Total credit hours taught, 37,464 credit hours taught. Our Providence Fund gifts from Southern Baptist, $44,141. Our total gift income of all gifts given to the seminary during that year, $2.3 million, which had all of us excited. Total income from student fees, $2 million. Total cooperative program gifts to the seminary, $4.8 million. The total for cooperative program and student fee income, $6.8 million. We'd never had that much before. Our total endowment, the largest it ever been, $23,476,000. Wow, that was a great year. Then we launched out in the next chapter in 1996. And by the time we got to 2005, our last full year before Katrina hit, what was God doing? Our total enrollment, 3,797 students. Unbelievable. Total credit hours taught, 53,331 students. Our Providence Fund gifts, $162,712. Our total gift income, $2.8 million. Our total student fees, $6 million. Our total cooperative program income, $8.2 million. Our total income for cooperative program and student fees combined, $14.4 million. And our total endowment had grown from $23 million to $43.9 million. There's a Hebrew word for that. Wow! I mean, what God was doing in the midst of all the challenges and struggles, take that, you Formosan termites. I mean, it was just a wonderful, wonderful time. Then Katrina, Great Recession, declining CP, spiking gas prices, all those other things. What's happened since 2005? Here we are at 2012, last year. What happened? 3,784 students, and we are right back at our pre-Katrina highs. Matter of fact, last year was the first time we began setting records without reference to Katrina. Largest enrollment of the NDIF program in history. Largest December graduation in history. Largest May graduation in history. And God really has done a wonderful work in bringing back students. Total credit hours taught, 51,929 credit hours taught. Providence Fund gifts, $757,000 gifts to the Providence Fund. Total gift income, $5.7 million of total gifts to the seminary. Total student fees, $7.6 million. Total CP, $7.7 million. A total combined income from CP and student fees, $15,246,000. And our total endowment, now you got to give me a break here. We had the Great Recession. We had interest rates going through the roof. The typical school in the United States during the Great Recession lost 25% of its principal and its endowment. So what happened at NOBTS? Endowment, $58,884,000. Look what God did. Wow. Do we serve an awesome God or what? That's how it looks. Yeah, go and give God a hand. I mean, I'm just telling you. When I became president, I had no dream or goal to build a single building on the campus. I had no interest in buildings whatsoever. I was really focused on curriculum and what we taught to prepare students. But sadly for me, the termites cast a different vote. And Katrina voted in a block with the termites. So what's happened in these 17 years in terms of new buildings on the campus? 30 new faculty homes were built for our faculty. 3 manor apartment buildings with 4-bedroom apartments. 3 courtyard apartment buildings with 4-bedroom suites around a common living area for our singles. 1 staff townhome with 3 units for staff families. 1 staff village apartment building with 10 apartments for staff members. A new maintenance building after Katrina wiped out the first one. 1 William Carey building that houses our WBSN radio station and the William Carey Nursing School. 1 Price Center for Urban Missions. 2 years before Katrina hit, we built a building to house volunteers who would come to New Orleans and work in our city. 2 years before Katrina. God provided the funds and God laid that on our heart. Do you think that thing's been used in the last 7 years? 3,000 people a year are coming to New Orleans, to our campus, to work throughout the whole New Orleans area for the sake of the gospel. Wow. 1 addition to the Price building. It's been so popular we had to add an addition. Half of Hardin Student Center was renovated. When you go over to Hardin Student Center, 17 years ago we were using half of that building. Now there's not a square inch not in use. A new swap shop building for our students to receive clothes and dishes and things like that, free of charge from people who give them to our seminary. 4 2-bedroom apartment buildings, the Oaks Apartments, Mississippi Apartments, Florida Apartments, and most recently the Grace Apartments. 2 buildings at Providence Guest House, Ham Hall and Henry Hall. This doesn't even include all the many renovation projects. We basically had to rebuild the campus twice, once after the termites and once after Katrina. Can you believe what God has done? Absolutely amazing. Some 50 buildings. New class delivery systems. When I started, we taught class here on campus, and we taught the great innovation we added as I just joined the faculty. They added night classes. That was our great innovation, and we began doing some extension centers. We had a few extension centers and using compressed interactive video. Well, in the last 17 years, our faculty, working so hard, has developed online classes to use the internet, hybrid classes combining class meetings with the internet, conference classes so you can attend a major conference somewhere in the United States that's really significant and get course credit as a part of doing that. The Modified Presence PhD that allows people who don't live in the New Orleans area to be able to earn a PhD if God puts that in their heart in several different areas. Mentoring classes that let students work in a church and do their seminary along the way with a mentor and supervisor walking with them through that experience. The Summer Language Institute, every summer, Hebrew and Greek, we alternate. This summer is Greek, next summer will be Hebrew. We take an immersionist approach to learning a foreign language, which is very common in learning modern foreign languages, and we've applied that to learning Greek and learning Hebrew for people who want a crash course in Greek and Hebrew grammar, and crash is probably a good word. But it's worked very well. We have people coming from other seminaries to do this training because they can get it in that very intensive form. New faculty chairs. We have celebrated the Ramsey Chair that has just been activated. In the last 17 years, we've had the Baptist Community Ministries Chair of Counseling, the Sizemore Chair of Christian Education, the Nelson Price Chair of Leadership, the Greer Hurd Chair of Philosophy and Culture, the Lolledge Feasel Chair of Worship and Praise, the Landrum P. Leavell Chair of New Testament, the Don and Helen Bryant Chair of Old Testament, the Robert Hamlin Chair of Expository Preaching, the James H. and Susan E. Brown Chair of Christian Counseling, the Perry Sanders Chair of Leadership, and the James and Rose Ramsey Chair of Counseling. Isn't that precious to undergird the work of this wonderful faculty and try to control the cost of theological education for you? We very rarely talk about gifts to the seminary until they actually come. But I thought it just might be an encouragement to you to see, in addition to these active things, commitments that people have made to the seminary. And I'll tell you just a few of them for these academic chairs. One day we will have the W.A. Criswell Chair of Expository Preaching. We will have the Hamp and Melanie Eccles Chair of Preaching and Pastoral Work. We will have the Janet Kemp Chair of Children's Ministry. We will have, from a now anonymous, Chair of Social Work. We will have the John and Alice Henderson Chair of Social Work. People who never heard your name think what you do is so important. They want to invest significant money in helping you get prepared out there. One of my favorite things to do is to work with faculty to make some of their dreams come true, and we've created a number of new faculty research centers. These are things that are not assignments. This happens when a faculty member comes to me and says, Dr. Kelley, I have this dream, and we talk about how we can help it, and they have to take responsibility for it. If there's anything I can do, I try to help them along. But here are some of the new faculty research centers that this world-class faculty has created. The Haggard Center for New Testament Textual Studies, the Youth Ministry Institute, the Michael and Sarah Moskow Institute for Archaeology, the Institute for Faith in the Public Square, the Institute for Christian Apologetics, the Day Center for Church Planting, the Global Missions Center, the Sanders Center for Ministry Excellence, and then the Center for Baptist Theology and Ministry. Every one of them faculty dreams that are making a difference in the world because they dream the dream and were willing to work for it. In addition to that, we have had some really cool partnerships. And now, cool is an ancient Greek expression. We've had some really cool partnerships. For instance, our inmate ministry training program. We are partnering with maximum security prisons. This is how you know we're a Baptist seminary. We are partnering with maximum security prisons. They're our kind of people in several parts of the United States to take inmates in whose life God is working and to train them to be ministers in the prison while they are serving out their prison terms, most of them never able to leave prison again the rest of their life. We started this at Angola, Louisiana. It's had a phenomenal effect, known all over the United States. Parchment, the maximum security prison in Mississippi. Phillips Prison in Georgia, maximum security prison. They pull prisoners from all over Georgia to bring them into this program for training. And then the women's prison here in Louisiana, LCIW. In addition to these inmate training programs, we have a partnership with Bethel Colony South for drug and alcohol rehabilitation. They're right across the street. We lease them the land for that car wash across the street. If you wonder where that comes from, we lease them that land for about $1 a year, and they wash cars and clean up people's cars to help those folks learn how to work and how to rebuild structure in their life. We partner with them in using them on some of our labor-intensive projects here on the campus, again, helping them learn to teach people how to work and how to accept responsibility. And then our faculty and students will go over and teach them the Bible and prepare them to be ministers in their context in the evenings. It's just a wonderful partnership. Do you know another seminary partnering with a drug and alcohol rehabilitation program? Providence Education Foundation. We have a radio station. We have our Mission Lab program, more than 3,000 students and senior adults and college students and even families coming from all over the United States to do mission work in New Orleans. Our classroom technology comes from an annual grant from Providence Education Foundation, a travel program taking our students and faculty to the lands of the Bible. And the Gezer Dig, we're right now excavating what is rated as one of the most important waterwork projects from the ancient world on the face of the earth. And our faculty have put this together, working with the Israeli Antiquities Authority. It's a huge deal in Israel. They've made some exciting discoveries. They'll be digging in the cavern they found at the bottom of the well this summer. It's pretty exciting. I told Dr. Parker and Dr. Cole when they find the Ark of the Covenant to please give me 24 hours notice, but it's a pretty exciting dig. Unlimited Partnerships, one of our programs that mentors our students for discipleship and education ministry in church, is just a phenomenal program for our CE students. There's some wonderful partners and others I don't have time to tell you about. And then there's just some neat stuff. This Gezer Dig and the waterworks that they're uncovering, very significant, going all the way back to the time of Abraham. New Testament textual databases. Our Bill Warren and our Greek faculty and students have been putting together this database working with scholars from all over the world so that if you have Greek study tools and you are pastoring a church in upstate New York or in some small church out in the Arizona desert or on the other side of the earth in India or Pakistan or Europe, and you want to look at all the textual variants for Mark chapter 3 or for John chapter 1 or for Galatians chapter 4, you can look and see all the textual variants there on the internet as part of anywhere you are in the world. Amazing. Greer Hurd, point counterpoint lecture, bringing in an atheist, a skeptic, an extreme liberal to debate a point of the faith with a very well-known evangelical right here in Leavell Chapel. Our interactive video network joining cities together in one classroom with everybody's talking to one another. Our extension center network all over the southeast. 60% of our students are taking most of their classes in somebody's church, and we are making it possible for people to get seminary who could never move and come for whatever reason. They are still able to get seminary, or if you get called to a church, you're able to finish your degree because there's probably going to be an NOBTS extension center located somewhere near you. Along the way, there's been a great sea change in the world of theological education. I could sum it up by saying we are not as weird as we once were. And after spending the first several years of my presidency being told how weird we were, how strange, getting lectured, the way we did seminary was going to result in the collapse of Western civilization, the ending of Christendom, and Jesus would probably delay his coming by a decade because of this strange way we were doing seminary. Well, now everybody is doing seminary the way we're doing seminary. This is the new normal in theological education. And most seminaries look something like this. They are developing a competency-based curriculum because the accredited agencies are telling them they have to. They're developing a cafeteria delivery system with multiple ways of teaching classes because that's what students demand. They are focusing on non-traditional students because that's who most students are. And they are connected to the church in some way. Does that sound familiar? And what we have been doing for all these many years is now becoming the mainstream of what everybody in the world is doing. In other words, it's time to laugh. It's time to understand, well, we've been doing, all the anxiety that you go through to pay your tuition each semester you register. All the hard work and getting those book reviews done and studying for those tests and kicking and fighting and gouging and scratching. All the faculty has been doing, just learning all these new technologies and developing all these new schools and completely redoing every course they teach. They can't teach it the same way twice. They're always having to reinvent every course, kicking and fighting and gouging and scratching and all these things happening around us. God is doing something great, because his kingdom always advances. I think this is beautifully illustrated in a film clip I'd like to show you. This is a film clip from a movie called Moneyball. You'll have three characters in this film clip. One character is, this is a true story by the way, Billy Beane. He's the manager of the Oakland Athletics to this day. His team was every year getting stripped by bigger teams who had a lot more money to pay him. Went to his owner and said, could you please give me more money? We can't build a successful baseball team if we don't have more money. And the owner said, that's all the money you're going to get. Just do your best. And he tried a radical new way to build a baseball team. Also in the movie clip is the guy he found to help him, a computer geek who had some strange ideas about how to build a baseball team. And they set about it in a completely different way than anybody in baseball was doing. And a little girl, for the general manager of the A's was divorced. He had one little child, and the little girl wrote a song for her daddy and recorded it with a little guitar. And the end of the clip is the little girl singing a song to her daddy. I want you to listen to that song. Here's what happened. The Oakland A's had a great season with this radical new model, although it was very tough in the beginning, had a great season, but they lost in the playoffs. Billy Beane has now been offered a job by the Boston Red Sox to become the highest paid manager in the history of sports. And he's trying to decide what to do, and he's still depressed over having lost in spite of all their hard work. Watch what happens.
What a dump. I really wanted to win here. I really did.
I think you won pretty big, Billy.
Pete, we lost. We lost.
It's only been a few days. You got to give yourself some time to get over it.
Man, I don't get over these things. Ever.